Last week, Blanche and I were in Big Indian, New York, and gave a class there for a pretty large crowd who all had made remarkable efforts to get there. There's no easy way to get to Big Indian. It's not near anything. So if you're driving from New York City or from Boston or wherever people were coming from, it's 2.5 hours, 3 hours or more. And these very big talks came out while I was there, which I felt were very, very important. And interestingly enough, none of them recorded. This didn't work, nothing. So nothing was memorialized from that talk. And in a way, I just took that as, well, clearly not meant to be. And in the old days, whenever I would give talks, I never recorded any of them. And I always looked at them as sand paintings that existed for the moment and then were dispersed into the atmosphere the way, life disperses into the atmosphere. And I have a very wonderful student in New York. He's actually from Connecticut. He's a doctor. His name is Greg. And he asked me to start recording these because he couldn't always be there and other people couldn't be there, and I have classes in different areas. So I started doing that, and then suddenly a class doesn't record. It's like, oh my God, no! It's like this great class is gone, and it was a very good reminder to me. It's all passing. It's all like the wind, and so you bring out what you bring out in the moment. Whatever comes up, and as you know, I don't know if you know this. I don't plan these things. I just start talking, and it kind of goes where it wants to go. But I do know that the class in New York was very much existential. It was all about what I would call the existential fear at the core of all of our lives that is pretty much unnamed and unexplored and something we don't want to look at. In fact, in many ways, life is an avoidance of that existential fear. And I spent a good 45 minutes talking about it, and I'm not going to do it now because I think there's a reason probably that I don't need to explore it twice. But out of that came a comment from one of my students in New York that all my last talks have been about fear and death, and she went on aging and all of these things. And I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. So if that's what I've been talking about and it's been upsetting people, I apologize, kind of. But she asked if I couldn't talk more about how to live your daily life. A lot of my students are not at the end of their lives and don't need to have all of these issues, although I have to say end of life is a very meaningful moment when you start to see how it all adds up. So I'm not upset about talking from this perspective, but I will talk about something that is very important, I think, which is the core of Rudi's teaching. And we were talking about it a bit at the introductory class today, that Rudi really spoke to us not so much about the goal of spiritual life, but the process of spiritual life. We were always aiming toward something, and I never knew what that something really was. I mean, he didn't have a very good opinion of enlightenment. Rudi always felt, enlightenment is old people sitting around in heaven talking about their operations, all the stuff they went through. And he just said, I don't want that. And I don't believe that's what enlightenment is exactly, but Rudi was much more about how do you get through life? How do I get through a day? How do I function in the world? And he was about that because he knew that, in a sense, a life that doesn't work, that has holes in it, that has fissures and breaks and leaks in it, is very hard to carry into some kind of spiritual wholeness. And And we were all very young in those days, and all of us were, at the beginning of careers, we were all struggling with our lives. We all had starting to have children. There were a lot of big issues coming up every day, and Rudi would address those issues. They were really important about how do we live. And what I will say, which I think is important, is that Rudi has 3 books, maybe 4, Spiritual Cannibalism, in his own words. Do you remember I forget all the titles, but they're all available. Into Infinity, thank you. And there's one other, but they're all really worth reading, and they're all worth reading because they really do get into day-to-day process, and they are all about something that Rudi was very interested in, which is called growing. Growing was the idea that we will all get somewhere. And where that place was never fully named. Where do we get to? But I just knew, as I was working with Rudi's practice over the course of 40-some years, that I never thought I was getting there. I kept feeling I was close. I kept feeling I had moments, and sometimes those moments would last 4 whole months, even or longer, of just aha. I would find these moments of exquisite, delicious presence and being. I would find these places in myself through his practice that were like doorways to joy, just beauty. And I would work to let go of all of that stuff in myself that wasn't allowing me to hold on to that beauty. So that became my practice. It was about surrender. That was the key of Rudi's practice, the word surrender. Please help me to surrender was at the essence, at the very core of this work. And so I would sit and try to let go and let go and let go. And, things fell away, as they do. Things would fall away. And then there would be all of these tests of whether or not I really had let go of these things. And Rudi talked a lot about tests because, in a sense, the universe has to see if it's working. So if your attachment, if somebody, there are people I know who you can push a certain button in them and they will suddenly become 5 years old. All of their insecurities, all of their drama, all of this stuff that's sort of hidden in that corner of their life will come shooting up. And so if they're working spiritually and they become aware of that button and they watch it happen enough times, they will go, okay, I don't need to be that person anymore. That 4-year-old person who has this level of insecurity that's still operating in my life, I can let go of that. And so as a meditator, you would watch that thing come up and you would kind of let it go. And you'd watch it come up and let it go. And you'd feel, well, I'm really getting somewhere. I'm letting go of a part of me that was a big part of the construct of my being. And then a week later, somebody would say something to you when you were totally off guard, and that button would get pushed, and you would do all the stuff you've always done. You would react to it in the same way of being diminished and admonished and unhappy and feeling lesser about yourself. And you would say, oh, I failed that test, but that's why it came. It came to teach me where I'm at. Clearly, I'm not as accomplished as I thought I was. And you become conscious of these patterns. You become conscious of yourself, and you go, I can grow beyond that. I can grow in spite of that. I can expand. I can become something that's free of what used to bind me. And it's an extraordinary thing. And growing was at the core of this practice we did as kids in our 20s, even in our 30s, 40s, where we were still working through our stuff. Rudi often said he was reparenting us, that he was doing stuff that our parents hadn't done. And I know, I've talked about this before, but my dad used to ask me to mow the lawn. I was the laziest kid, and I would mow a little bit of the lawn and say, that's it. I can't do any more lawn mowing. And so my dad would go out and finish the lawn. And I thought, well, I got away with that. I didn't have to do the whole lawn. But I hadn't gotten away with it. And Rudi would ask me to work much harder than my father ever did. And for Rudi, I got it. I said, okay. And I suddenly understood I am doing all the work for Rudi that I never did for my dad. That somehow in life, the situation came about that allowed me to complete something that I had left incomplete. And in that regard, he truly was parenting me. Also, I started to love Rudi so much. And the fact that he represented so much possibility in life. And so when I would hug Rudi, I remember I was hugging him once, and he said, "That's it. Love is what you feel when you're 4 years old and hug your mother." And that's exactly what I was feeling. That was the best definition of love I ever had, because, I hug my granddaughter now, and I feel that love come back from her. It doesn't get better than that. I can feel what she's feeling for me, and I can feel what I'm feeling for her. And Rudi gave me an acknowledgement of that. He gave me a key into that. So my life was starting to really become solid. And, I met Blanche, and Rudi was the one who acknowledged that this is the direction I should go in. And for Blanche too. I think when Blanche asked Rudi if she should marry me, he said, "You're only going to meet some other schmuck just like him, so you might as well just go with him." And what great advice that was. And so we had a marriage that's gone for 45 years, and children and grandchildren, and a richness of life that came out of Rudi. He gave me solid ground, something I could walk on, something I could really embrace. And he gave me a career. He gave me an amazing career. And he did it in many, many different ways. One of the things Rudi did is he came up with 30 songs for a musical. And he called them the Big Black Rainbow. And they were strange songs about a black woman in Harlem, and they each, none of them came together, but he said, "Here, make a musical, write something." And I went, "Oh." So I said, "Okay." And I wrote a musical. I wrote a whole book for a musical. It wasn't all that good in the end, but I wrote this thing because I wanted to make Rudi happy. And we got someone to do music, and we had one of those moments where you sit around a piano and everybody's there and you hear all the songs for the first time. None of it was very good. But the truth was, he did it for me. He really gave me something, and I had a career. And part of the reason I had a career is that he taught me how to talk. He taught me how to open my throat chakra, how to open my third eye and see, and to allow this creativity to come through. He allowed my heart to open and embrace people, and I could start to feel love, not just for Rudi and for my wife, but for so many people. This is an amazing thing. Rudi would sit with me, and he would, like I sit with you, he would send out this energy, which was basically, at least in content, it was love. It was just love. And we could sit in the room and feel ourselves being loved. And it was like, wow, what is this? Why are we gathered in this spot, sitting with this big guy who's just blasting energy out into the atmosphere that was so delicious and so satisfying? What are we doing with all this? So I took it inside, and I worked it as best I could and tried to feel myself growing, becoming more of a person. And then he died, and I went, now what? Now what? My teacher's gone. What do you do when your teacher's gone? Well, the first thing that happened is I'm downstairs in the meditation room the day Rudi died. Everybody's gone upstairs to sit and commiserate, and I don't know, I just didn't want to go with anybody. I just stayed downstairs, and I was bowing down, and I felt myself get goosed. And the only person I know in the world who would goose me like that would be Rudi. He played with us. And I went, he's still here. And what a weird way to announce his presence. But I knew fully that Rudi hadn't gone anywhere, that my journey in this work was not over. And so I kept working, and I knew I had to find a new way to immerse myself deeper in this, because I didn't want to have things get away from me, and I wanted to grow more. And we moved to an ashram in Indiana and continued our work. And I gave up. I was a museum curator in New York, and this was like, I'd arrived somewhere solid. But I wanted my spiritual life more than I wanted anything. And so I moved to Indiana, and it was there that I started teaching and saw the value and the gift of teaching. And I kept breaking myself down more and more. And so there was a lot of freeing that was happening, but there was always the question, when do I get there? When do I finally get there? And there was, in my mind, fairly clear. It was a kind of psychedelic cosmic consciousness that was similar to the LSD I had taken many, many years before. That was the kind of there I thought I was aiming at. And it never happened. I would get these moments, as I described earlier, for a few seconds, a few minutes, and sometimes for a few months of a kind of bliss that would be so beautiful, and then I couldn't hold on to it. And when I couldn't hold on to it, I knew I was a failure on some level. I didn't know why I couldn't hold on to it. So I just thought, if I do something harder, more, meditate longer, try all these different things, it will happen. But, you know, there was nothing ever that was permanent. There was no kind of permanent bliss and joy that I thought was supposed to be the goal of all this. And I started looking into other teachings, something I never thought I would do. But I went to a Vipassana retreat for 10 days of complete silence and sitting. And I hated this retreat. I have to tell you, I hated every minute of it. And halfway through, I went in to the teachers and said, I can't do this. I'm failing your meditation. I'm leaving. And they said, you can't leave now. You're in the middle of an operation. The sutures are hanging all over the place. You've got to stay. And I went, oh, God. They said, but you can sit in a chair if you want, because my back was aching and my feet, everything was horrible. So I went back, and I stayed for the rest of it. And on the last day, when we were allowed to talk, I met a man who had done 30 of these, and much longer ones, 60 days, 90 days, sits. And he talked about another approach to meditation, which he didn't name exactly, but I've come to understand as Advaita Yoga, or non-dualism, and how he had been a student of someone named Ramesh Balsekar, who was a student of someone named Nisargadatta Maharaj, who wrote a book called I Am That, all of which is fundamental building blocks of a kind of other way of looking, another way of doing spiritual work. And they started talking about something that I had heard from Ramana Maharshi when I was younger, that you are already the thing you're looking for. And I went, I can't buy that. If this is what I'm looking for, I don't want it. That's basically how I felt. How could I possibly want to be this? But it kept coming back to me, and then I started hearing it more through Nisargadatta. And then Eckhart Tolle arrived, and Eckhart started giving talks 5 minutes from my house in upstate New York at the Omega Institute. And so I went, and a whole part of my class went to see that. And Eckhart really got to me. He started talking about the power of now, the power of now. And it made sense to me. And he said something that really rang true, which is really important, which is nothing you're looking for is in the future. And that just hit me. And then I started meeting more people, and some guy wrote me out of the blue and said he'd written a movie, or made a movie about the 3 enlightened people, and would I like to look at it? And I went, well, okay. You know, I didn't quite buy it, and I, being a screenwriter, a lot of people try to send me their stuff to, comment on and write little blurbs about. But I said okay, and I said I can't promise I'll look at it right away, but I looked at it that night. And there were 3 guys in it, 2 of whom I found boring, except when they talked about the Enlightenment. But one guy I found totally fascinating, named Bart Marshall. And he was a guy who had an awakening, a spiritual awakening, in the middle of a battle in Vietnam. And that just knocked me out. It's just like, wow, what's that? And then he had a complete awakening, which he called it, some years later, about 30 years later. And I was so knocked out by him, and I wrote and told the guy that I would write this blurb for him. And the next thing I knew, Bart calls me, and I was like, oh my God, this enlightened guy's calling me, and I'm so thrilled to have a direct dialogue with someone. And he wants me to read a screenplay. And I went, oh God, what does it mean to be enlightened? and want to have somebody read your screenplay? I felt like it was going completely the wrong direction. But he and I got together, had this amazing connection, and spent 4 days together in Virginia, talking like I was talking to myself, really, which in a sense I was. And it was brilliant. And he asked me to come talk at some of these seminars that they do once a year of enlightened people. But I said, I'm not enlightened. He said, it's okay, come. And I would give these talks year after year as the what can I call, what was the word? There's a word, but the unenlightened guy. I was the unenlightened guy who would give talks, but somehow they resonated with people, and I talked about Rudi. And I looked at these guys who were somewhat enlightened, a lot of them, and I went, but they're missing something. There they are, they're enlightened, they have this something, they do, but the core structure wasn't right. Things were not there, hearts were not open, minds were fixed, the belly was not functioning. And I went, well, isn't that interesting, that you can awaken into something, I don't know what it was called at that point, I kind of called it presence. But you can awaken into that and not be complete. That was very interesting for me. And then one year I was there and I gave a talk, and people came up to me afterward and said, you know, you're already awakened. And I went, well, I mean, that's an interesting piece of information, but I wish I knew it. And I had no idea. And the next day, Paul Hederman was giving a talk, an amazing guy who lives very close to here, who came out of addiction therapies, and he started talking, and I couldn't understand a word he was saying. But his brain was going so fast I couldn't interpret anything, and the next thing I knew, I was sitting there and I went, oh, that's weird, something's not here, something's changed. And I realized there was no me left. I have no idea what that meant. There's just nobody there interpreting anything. There was no Bruce in the room. It's impossible to describe what that is or what that feels like, but it's an absence and a presence at the same time, and it's phenomenal. And I realized, I'm skipping a lot here, but I realized this is what I was looking for. But it wasn't that I was looking for it as though I could have it. There was nobody left to look. That's what I was looking for the whole time. There was nobody left. The search was over. There was just this. And what is this? This, this thing that we're sitting in, this room, wherever you are sitting at the moment, that's all there is. That's the totality. This is what is. It's never been other than this. And I don't care how blissful you go, whatever mountain you go to sit on top of, you're never away from this, whatever it is. And many of us come back from that bliss into day-to-day life. Like, oh God, here we go. I got to go to work. I got to do this. The stuff Rudi talked about. So I realized Rudi taught us how to live here, how to be in the world, how to have a strong, beautiful, connected life, and at the same time, in a way, we never were aiming for anything other than that. And one of the key things that happened for me in my spiritual practice, and when I was the token unenlightened guy, that's the word I was looking for, when I was giving my last talk as the token unenlightened guy, I realized, and had realized before, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I don't know what I'm aiming for. Basically, I gave up. I gave up trying to get there. I gave up trying to arrive at anything. I just said, in Rudi's very classical terms, I surrender. Which is all Rudi ever was trying to tell us. Surrender. I let go of everything in the end, and there I was. With no Bruce. Just this. Which I say clearly looks like Bruce. And talks like Bruce, acts like Bruce, and is, for all intents and purposes, Bruce. But it's not. It's not. And I know because of what has happened here that the same is true for each one of you. That each one of you is not who you think you are. You are that, but at some moment, when the search ends, you will suddenly see right through the veil of your idea of separateness, of your idea of being who you are, that it's just a character in a huge drama that's happening right now. And you are the drama. You are the totality. You are the absolute. You are all there is. And that's what suddenly arrives. With all of its mixed soup of flavors and condiments and spices and all that stuff. The good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, all that stuff. You are that mix. That's exactly who you are, even as we speak. And as imperfect as that may seem to you, it is part of perfection. It is one with perfection. Perfection is not the elimination of anything. Perfection is the absolute combination of everything. It's what is. And that's really hard for people to understand. But there's process in all this, and that's part of perfection. There is a way to make yourself a more complete person, or as I call it sometimes, a vessel, able to contain that which the universe wants to reveal to you. And if you have a weakly based life, imperfect, structurally unsound, fissures and breaks and tears and leaks, if you have all of that, the universe can't pour itself into you because you can't contain that. You can't do anything with it. You're not a vessel ready for this awareness. And when you are ready for it, you probably will feel at that moment that you are not ready. You will probably feel, I'm not there. I don't know how to get there. I have no clue how to do this. I give up. I give up. And that's all it takes. You surrender. You're not ready. Nobody's ready. You're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. Nobody is ready for this. Nobody. And you're not supposed to be. You're just supposed to be deeply surrendered. You've tried it all. Nothing worked. Now here you are. You know, and the universe it really listens. It's not mocked. You know, God's not mocked. He knows exactly, she knows exactly what's going on inside you. Exactly. Everything. And then today we were having this conversation before class started, and this thought just hit me. I mean, it's not like it's totally new, but it was so clear. And I can't even explain the way it works, but I'm very grateful to you guys for standing there talking. But each one of us is on our own private, perfectly designed and created path to awareness. Every one of us is completely unique, and yet the journey is our individual journey, and it's brilliantly designed for us, specifically for us, individually, in our own completely unique configuration. It couldn't happen any other way. You are absolutely pre-designed, if you will, for an unfolding that will bring you to everything that I'm talking about, and probably more. You know, because in no way do I feel like there's anything finished. I don't know what finished is. All I know is it's happening, only it's not personal anymore. It's absolute, it's impersonal, and it's complete. It's grand, and it's design. And each of us is individually in that. And each of us is programmed, if you will, bad word maybe, but it's the right idea. Each one of us has the entire thing we need within the construct of our own crazy individual life, with all of its imperfections and all of its drama and all of the stuff that doesn't work and is wrong and it seems incomplete. It couldn't be done any other way. You can only arrive there through you, period. It's the only way it happens. And if you're looking at me and going, but if I was this, or if I was prettier or handsomer, or if I had, if I could stay deeper, or if I wasn't so lazy. No, you have to be lazy, and you have to be less pretty, and you have to be this, and you have to be that, because it's the only way it will work for you. The only way. It cannot be done in any other way. So your own path is the design that you require for this extraordinarily clear knowing to occur. And it will. It will, because it cannot not happen. There's no way for it not to happen. But it may not happen in your time frame. And you may feel, that if you're really hungry for it, it's probably going to come about. But if you're kind of not so hungry about it and you want to just kind of stay lost in the drama and the illusion of creation, it's happy to let you do that. It's totally content to let you take as long as you want or as your design sort of requires. So it's possible to live, I think, I go out on a limb here because I don't know for sure that there are many lifetimes. I don't know how that works, but my sense of it is, yes, very few people get this done in a lifetime. A lot of people there's too much karma, there's too much consequence from past actions to complicate your own brain to make it impossible for you to get there. Except if you design into the system a teacher to come in and help you through this. If someone to go, whoa, hey, there's a way out of this. There's a way out of all of your karma, all of your drama, all of the bullshit that you've taken on as being you. There is help here. And why those people appear, I don't know, but the classical understanding is when you need a teacher, the teacher will appear. Rudi appeared, for me, out of nowhere. I'd spent 1.5 years traveling through India looking for teachers and had endless exposure to all these teachers, and I said, they're not my teacher. I knew they were not my teacher. They were all kind of good and interesting and capable, but I just said, no, I don't. This isn't. I'll know when I find it. The minute I met Rudi, and he said, what were you doing in India? And I said, I'd gone to find a teacher. He said, did you find one? I said, no. He said, well, I can teach you everything you want to know. There was no hesitation in me about that. It was absolutely clear that he could, and that his practice and my earnestness in the practice brought me to a place where I can talk about it with some kind of authority. I keep saying the word, the truth is this and the truth is that. I finally understood I have to say, my truth is this and my truth is that, because who knows what the truth is? I have no idea. But my truth is there is a path through your own congestion, through your own lack of understanding, through your own sort of insipid dramas that you have to go through over and over. There's a path through that. It's not hard. You just have to want it, but you have to really want it. Because it's not delivered to people who kind of want it. If you kind of want it, yes, it'll come, but you may have to go 25 more lifetimes or 25 million more lifetimes. I don't know. Does it really work like that? Scary as it can be, but it could be that you may keep complicating the problem over and over as a way of kind of avoiding the truth. And why does one avoid the truth? My truth says you avoid the truth because there is a compulsion, a deep compulsion to be this separate entity, this separate thing. It's designed in a way to make us completely fascinated by manifestation. The manifested universe is a dazzling show. It's dazzling. It complicates us in its richness of beauty and in its horror. It's complicating because we're running from one thing and running toward another. The only way out of it, really, is to sit perfectly still and see how insubstantial it is. That the manifested universe is really just a construct. That is almost mind over matter, really. It's really a mindful state. And it doesn't have the power and it doesn't have the drama that we think it does. And when you sit still in meditation, you begin this process of going in. And in that space, you start to see there's something else. There's something bigger that's making all of this take place. But to get there, you have to sit still. And if you want to find one of the biggest fears in almost every human being around, it's sitting still with themselves, with the mind ego, which the mind ego is so dynamic. And it offers all sorts of possibilities and all sorts of terrors. And it throws it all at you. And there you are saying, I can't handle this. And you keep trying to go forward to get enough money and get enough love and get enough stuff to not have to be afraid anymore, to worry about the stuff that's going to come when everything's taken away. You think if you have enough, there won't be any fear. And of course, everything in you knows they're going to take everything away. Everything you have is going to be taken away. So it's a false life we're living. Everyone's living a false life, but you don't want to know that, so we just collectively agree that this is meaningful. If I make $1 billion, I'll be free and happy. Well, I was telling you guys that This morning, I know people who've made $1 billion and they are not free and happy. They are among the unhappiest people I've ever known because they've realized when you get everything you want, it isn't there. It's not in that. It's somewhere else. Where? Well, it's here. It's right here. Where else is there but right here? And really, this inner space that you find yourself going into, this stillness, just basically shows you this world that we're in is this incredible balance between the manifest and the unmanifest. How it occurs, I have no clue. Why it's happening, pretty much no clue. That it is happening, absolutely true for me. And I have to say, arriving at that truth, or that beauty, that isness of being, seems to be what this is about. I don't know what else one wants than that, than to be here in this, both knowing its absolute presence and its absolute impermanence at the same time. You know, there's no way the mind can configure what this structure is, but the fact that you're in it, that we're actually here sharing it, you're listening to me right now, but you guys talk about it as well. I know you do. This is the mystery of mysteries. And it's the most beautiful mystery there is. And we know it's beautiful because I can look at you guys. First of all, I mean, I don't know if you see each other as beautiful as I get to see you, but every one of you is beautiful, beautiful. Look out the window. I mean, this is, they created Marin County to prove, that there is real beauty in life and the world. And this is absolutely exquisite. And I should let people see this. I don't know if they can see out the window. You see anything? It's really pretty. So here we are. One way or another, we have to grow through our path to this moment of finally saying, it's not about me. I surrender. Thy will be done. And just enter your life from a perspective of, well, you can't enter it from a perspective of anything but the perspective you bring to it. But it will become full of gratitude. It will become full of awe and wonder and true appreciation, and there'll be lots of joy in it. But I have to tell you also, because people don't get this, all these people want awakening to be free of pain and suffering and doubt and fear. That does not happen. That does not happen. And if that's what you want, it's a false awakening. What you awaken to is the beauty of it all. And it's all part of your life. If you're looking to escape something, you're in the wrong business. Spirituality is not an escape from anything, it's an enter into everything, which you discover is nothing. How do you explain that? I have no idea. But if you're trying to get away from the pain of life, it's not going to happen. But if you want to see pain in a different light, if you want to be able to look at it for what it is, as opposed to what you fear, you see it as part of this process. And you learn how to eat it. You learn how, that's what Rudi always said, eat your pain. It's a great line. Consume it, grow from it, bring it in, take it on, get strong, be able to function in life, take your tensions and eat them, rise above your tension, function, be dynamic. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful way to live. It beats the alternative of being the victim of all these forces. You're not the victim of anything unless that's the path you've chosen, because a lot of people have a lot of pleasure in being a victim. People do. I mean, that's what they get. And so they go that path, and at the end of their life, they may question whether that was the best choice, and then it's kind of late to do anything about it. I think you can awaken at any moment, but if you get to the end of your life and you haven't been doing the work, what Rudi called the work, I think there's a great awareness of how much you just didn't do. I mean, imagine being in a class in school and not studying, not reading the text, not doing the homework, not, paying any attention to the teacher, just having fun and doing whatever you want, and then the grades come in and you just flunked that class, or you flunked the grade, That's real. Why do you have those horrifying dreams of not being prepared for, the exam that's coming up? It's because most of us are not prepared for what is not only coming, but here. You don't want to get to the end of your life, and this is what I'm talking about. Sorry, if those of you who are upset about that. But you don't want to get to the end of your life and find that you flunked, that you didn't learn the lessons of this particular class. Then what? Well, it's very simple. In the world that we know, you come back and do it again until you pass. Right? It's Groundhog Day on some level. You keep coming back until you get it right. That's okay, I guess, if you want to keep coming back until you get it right. I mean, I don't mind. I mean, who knows? I may be back or may not be back. But what else is there to do, in a way? I mean, who knows? I mean, what's the unmanifested existence? I don't know. I guess floating in some kind of pretty amniotic sac, I guess. It's, very, very, you don't have to do anything. But the real world that we come into has demands and purpose, and somehow the universe, over the course of however many billions of years, if in fact it's even limited to billions of years, it might be trillions of years, the universe made this. It made this. You. In all of its billions of years or trillions of years of manifestation, it made you. Why? Why were you that important? That it would work that hard at creating planets and galaxies and all of this so you could exist? You think it's a mistake? You think it just kind of haphazardly happened? Well, I mean, you can think that. I mean, it's fine to think that. But I don't think so. And I think there's a reason you're here, and there's a reason probably for being present that you can work yourself toward becoming aware of. And in the end, it might not be a reason that makes sense. And it may not be reason at all. It may have no meaning at all. But it is. You can add meaning and reason, but it is. You will not be able to doubt that you are present, that you have presence. And it's exquisitely beautiful that that's true. So here we are, gathering. I've been asked to speak about the work, Rudi's work. Well, I hope it's clear that it's work not in the abstract. It's towards something, that it will have great clarity when you get old. The very end of your life, it will be unbelievably valuable to you, but it will be valuable to you the whole time that you're going through the journey. And the end of life is not separate from the middle or the beginning of life. It's all one continuum. People can call it a timeless continuum, which makes no sense to the mind, but when you separate from your own ego mind, timelessness becomes palpable. Something's just happening. It just happens. And it's happening all the time. It doesn't seem to stop. So it will stop when it wants to stop, and until that time, here we are. What do? We do what we do. We do what we do. And it seems the universe is pretty happy with that most of the time. And if you're not happy with it, change it. There's work to be done. Open these chakras, breathe in, take on the world, find the thing that you need to do, find your life, fill it up, ask for something more, ask for help to surrender. It'll all come, and at some point, you will be absolutely at one with this process. You're already at one with it, but you'll know you're at one with it. It will be very beautiful. I actually have to stop myself from talking because I can go on, as you guys know. So I'm going to just bring this to a close. But I want you to just understand that it's an extraordinary thing that you brought yourself to this moment, whether you're listening on tape or whether you're sitting in this room. You have no idea how select it is to have selected yourself to be here, being in presence, conscious of presence, knowing that you are part of an extraordinary and rarefied process of awakening to self, awakening to who you are. Somehow, the universe supports this process, appears to, in my experience, love this process, and is very grateful to you for doing what you're doing. Are there any questions what I'm talking about? Please.
I brought a quote from Rudi because I asked you about enlightenment and read about it and spoke to people who said they were enlightened. And as I thought about it and opened my heart, tried to turn off my mind, which is hard. But he said, and this is Rudi in his own words, people who make the claim to be enlightened have only done one thing. They have reached a place where they are no longer capable of growing. Nobody, until the day he or she dies, qualifies for the title enlightened being. Somewhere along the way, if you stop working, the circle opens and you begin to lose the quality that has to do with being enlightened. And after everything I've read and experienced, Rudi, that's it. Because he was humble, he was disciplined. With his students, he was a taskmaster. You do not go away from your physical, earthly responsibility. It's the spiritual in there. He didn't like a lot of the things going on in the name of spirituality. I mean, this guy, life is nourishment. I walked the Camino de Santiago, and that's what that's all about. Every step, the good or the bad. And that's exactly what Rudi said.
I'm not disagreeing with anything of that at all.
Yeah, I wanted you to speak to that comment about enlightenment, but I don't even know what that would be anymore, because it's like you got to work till you die.
Well, I mean, yes and no. Yes and no. Until you literally are no longer in the flesh, in the body, you're still here, one way or the other. But the you that's here changes, and that's what's really interesting. It's no longer the ego-mind struggle. It's you as this. And it's clearly still in the world. It's still part of the manifested form. It still has to function, and it has to function as brilliantly as what we were talking about earlier. It has to be part of the dynamic of the world, only now it's so much more able than ever before to be that. It's so much more connected to the journey of all human life. And everybody who awakens finds that they have a new dialogue with the universe. It's no longer personal, it's no longer agenda-driven, at least not their agenda. They're just part of this vast being that wants to become more and more conscious of itself. Because in that consciousness, things arrive that are quite remarkable, like compassion, like love, like capacity to do, the ability to work for the whole rather than the part. The fact that you can serve humanity and not just your own hunger for, your own aggrandizement. All of that keeps happening, but it happens in a much more profound way. And that's what one arrives at in the what we call enlightened or awakened mind, where you sort of see you're no longer the center of the universe. You are one with the universe. But it doesn't stop anything, and I think that's what Rudi was trying to get at. And you still have to function well. And when I started working with these people, doing Rudi's work, who were enlightened, and I saw stuff that wasn't done yet, if you talk to any of those people, they would acknowledge it. They would just acknowledge it. What's really remarkable about awakened people is the shared dialogue, the shared quality of dialogue that occurs. There's a shorthand, an awareness in your talking with each other that's so beautiful. It's so simple. And that's something that I've come to really appreciate. I keep wondering if the world could ever be like that. I have no idea. I love the idea of multiples of people awakening, popping, as I've often talked about it, or people have explained it to me. But Buddha himself said, I'm told, out of a million people who study with him, maybe 2 would awaken. So it's clearly not a sociological phenomenon where everybody can have it happen. At least it hasn't been in the past. Eckhart Tolle thinks it's happening now. A lot of people are popping. A a lot of people are awakening. I don't know if that's true. I'm certainly personally meeting more people. I mean, I always imagined that the awakened people had long beards and and long hair and sat in the Himalayas, and that was how I always left it in my mind. When I started meeting normal, everyday people who had this awakening and seeing more and more, I go, something's happening here. Something really beautiful. And it may have always been going on, but we never had the internet to share it. Now we do. So we're aware of something remarkable taking place in the culture, at least those who are looking for it. And you can go online and find a lot of this. Some of them are deeply authentic, and you can tell. Others are, a little bit in it for themselves, and I just question that. Because if you're trying to get something for you out of all this, it doesn't ring true to me. It's just my sense of it. On the other hand, it's still talking about this, and that's probably good. Rudi was never self-serving, and he was as humble as you say. He was, but he was also as a taskmaster, and he was he would break us down into pieces in order to help us get there. But he claimed there was no enlightenment, and I've had other of Rudi's teachers talk to me about how can you claim to be enlightened because there's no such thing and it's worthless anyway until you're dead. They're wrong. They're wrong. It's not worthless. It's doable in this lifetime, but it doesn't confer anything on you other than clarity, some kind of clarity. But it's not like you can walk around with the robes and the crown and say, hey, I'm here, I've done it. That's a big mistake. And I think the people I've met are all, as you called it, humble. And you're humble because you realize there's no you to be angry, to be pushed upward. You're just one of it. None of us are different. One thing you realize is the unenlightened person is as valid in this construct as the enlightened person. God doesn't say this person is great and this person is worthless. Never happens. Each person is on a ride. I don't care how dark their ride is, how horrible their ride may appear to be. They're on a ride, and they're on a ride that's going to take them through to this awareness at some point. And it could happen right now if they wanted it to. I have friends who work in prison, and I've taught in prison as well, meditation. And if you want to meet a population of people that are ready to know all this stuff, that's the population. They already know the imprisonment of the soul. The people out on the street don't know it. So we're all finding our path. Everybody's on their path, and and those lines from Rudi, can be haunting on some level because I think it may make people feel that I don't want to be enlightened. I would say. In a way that's okay. This thing will happen anyway, whether you want it or not. But understanding the possibility of an awakening is very valuable. It's very valuable.
Well, when I read that, and I read about his intensity before he would go to India, everything's nourishment, transcendent,
right.
And it was like, I know what it's like to live like that, where 24/7 you are intense. And I went, that's why he died when he was 44, because who can sustain that?
Well, you may have something. I don't think that's why he died.
Well, no, I'm just saying, but how do you live your whole life till you're 80?
I don't think he would have.
Okay.
He was 45 when he died. He had just turned 45. He had lived a certain kind of life. He built a big business. He came out of nothing and became very wealthy, owned a lot of New York real estate. He was self-made in a way that, a lot of us who watch TV and, these shows that try to inspire us of self-made people, they all work like that. But he had a spiritual connection at the same time, not just a material connection. He saw it as part of something bigger, But, what I'm teaching is Rudi or Rudi plus, let's say. I'm not totally into work for its own sake, but I do think that work can break you down. It can build you up. It can do all these amazing things for you, and he had an extraordinary capacity for doing that. And all of us who joined in with him were really good workers, really good workers. On the other hand, I'm looking at a lot of people who studied with Rudi, who are now much older, in their 60s and more, whose work didn't get them where they wanted it to, who didn't arrive at that place, who walk around in many ways feeling like failures. And that level of effort and work by itself isn't necessarily a given to bring you something that you want to walk away from this life with. I mean, I'd love to sit down with Rudi and have a conversation about this, but I think he and I would see eye to eye completely at this point. I think we're not talking in opposite terms at all. I think it's all a shared thing, but I do think there's a path beyond which Rudi was yet to teach, and I think he would have taught that, down the road. I never know if Rudi had an awakening or not have an awakening. The only thing I've ever had that gave me a hint was a dinner that we had one night at a restaurant with one of his students called Serendipity in New York, and I was sitting across the table from him, and I kept staring at him with just loving him so much, and just looking and gazing. And he came over to me afterwards and said, "What were you looking at?" All during dinner. I said, "You, Rudi." He said, "No, you couldn't have been, because I didn't come back from where he had been. He had been in Texas." He said, "I didn't come back." That used to drive me crazy. What does that mean? He didn't come back. Now I think I know. It's a big transformation, but he didn't talk about it in those terms. I don't think any of us were ready to hear it in those terms. But he didn't come back. What was there was what's here now, which is always what's there. Period. Long answers. Yeah.
I didn't quite get what you meant about you now know what he means by he didn't come back.
The same way I've been talking about when I was sitting and my awakening happened, Bruce was just gone. Bruce disappeared. There was just this, but there was no ownership. There was no person who owned it, who had it. Rudi came back from Texas as a body and a form and a mind and a teacher and everything else, but Rudi probably, as he knew it, was gone. That's my suspicion, And the one thing I noticed about Rudi at the end of his life that I found to be really important to me was he became more and more Rudi. It was like he was totally Rudi. Now, I think you will find the same thing in anybody who awakens, that they will be perceived by everybody on the outside as more and more them. There's nothing, they're just like full-born, full-blown, complete people. And that's how you're seen. You're not seen as somebody who's not there, you're seen as somebody who's really there. Whatever that means. But that's kind of what Rudi became for me. So I've had to put the puzzle together after the fact because he was so important in my life, and I used to think, well, maybe he never had an awakening. And then I thought about that moment, and I said, I think he did have that awakening. And it's been given to me and to others perhaps along the way to express what that means in terms of his teaching. So that's kind of what I do. It was hard for me at first because Rudi's teaching is so goal-centric, growth, change, transformation, and I'm so not that exactly. I'm trying to be just accept the what is, as opposed to try to get to what could be or should be. But it all weaves together. It just weaves together in a beautiful way ultimately, and that's kind of the best way for me to teach it. And I'm a devoted Rudi student. I've had people who have awakened who've told me you don't need Rudi anymore. Well, I don't need Rudi anymore, but I'm a devotee. I'm devoted to the teacher that found me, and that's what I will be till I leave. Why would I not?
I think last week when I was here, you mentioned something very profound, that when you're enlightened or awakened, we don't have the language for it actually. You should stay in the state of awe, as you said it today.
Well,
and you can't find the language to express that which you experienced. And so you just withdraw for a while, or this guy, Mayor Baba, for 40 years, he couldn't even speak a word.
Right. I've never been at a loss for language. But that's what I am. I'm a writer. I'm a writer, and that's what I do. And so I talk as best I can. And what I say is rather similar to what I hear other people of the same ilk talk. They talk the same way.
Ultimately, you have to come out and
start
talking.
Well, you don't have to. I mean, you can. I mean, I had a guy call me. He had been a hermit for 30, 40 years. Yeah. And he called me out of the blue. Out of the blue. He said, I've heard your talks, and I want you to know how resonant they are, that he had awakened 40 years ago, left his family and everybody and moved to the woods because he couldn't share this with anybody. But he called me and he said, you know, you're speaking it. You're telling it as it is. And then he died. He died like a week or two later. It was a strange experience for me, but it was an interesting acknowledgement. You know, because you don't know. I don't know that I'm speaking anything but what I will call my truth. Because to call it the truth, which I kept doing for a long time, is complicated. But it's certainly my truth, and it comes through in a way that has, I think, a certain authenticity. If it speaks to you, terrific. If it doesn't speak to you, find the one who speaks to you, or let it happen to you and you find the way to speak it, or not speak it. It's more important to live it than to speak it. A lot of people speak it, and you know, it's just words. You know, for most people hear this stuff and they don't know what you're talking about. You know, if this tape were played for 98% of the world or 99.9% of the world, they would go, "What is he talking about?" You know, I completely get that. Yeah. So, and you know, I've tried to put it into movies. It won't go. No way. There's no way the audience understands or wants to hear this part of it. You can't do it directly. So I use this as my direct talk, and then movies I've used as my sort of indirect way into people's existence. But, you know, you find your path, you find the way that works. Some people don't have a voice, will not have a voice for it, and it doesn't matter. If you're in their presence, you'll know it the same way you'll know you're in the presence of anybody who's had a clarity and awakening. And the beauty of that is so extraordinary. And I see it in your eyes as much as I see it in any other eyes. I mean, you're such a wonderful presence. You know, it's just, there it is. And what more can one say? You know, I know people who see you and look at you and refer to you and think of you as their enlightened teacher. You know, I don't know your story at all. We haven't had that discussion, but I know you. I can tell just sitting here, you know, that you have that truth. And so here we are. You know, we don't have to talk it. We don't have to share stories. We just have to be. We just have to be. And there's a great joy in that. Just great. Okay, this is probably 2 hours long. Okay.
I'll ask you after. I just have 3 questions.
You just had 3 questions?
Yes. I have 3 questions.
Well, go for it, and these people can turn it off if
Okay,
you're
I'll do
bored.
real quick.
Okay.
Just answer real quick.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but before Rudi died, it seemed like he knew he was going to die, and he put all his ducks in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And in my reading, people have said we better carry on his work properly so he doesn't have to come back. And did Rudi ever say he was coming back, or did he ever speak to that before he died, that he would come back?
Well, I will tell you that he told a lot of his students to gather together the weekend or the days where he had died, and all the people teaching for Rudi were in New York City. He had told several of them that he was going to die in an airplane crash. And he believed, I think, that he was on his way to Europe at the end of that week, and I think he thought it would be on the way to Europe. But it was a small plane in the end where he died. So he knew, according to these people, that he was going to die. All his ducks in a row, well, he had all of his teachers together to be there for that moment, which is pretty extraordinary. But I'm told a lot of people who are connected kind of know when they're going to die. They kind of have a sense of it. So I think there's some truth to that. Rudi had said to us before all this awareness came, before this, that he was going to leave for 11 years and go to the Middle East, and he would not be around, and he was going to be leaving soon. And I never knew what that was about. You know, in fact, when he died, I thought maybe he actually had gone to the Middle East, and this was and I never looked in the coffin. It was a closed coffin, so I was never totally persuaded he was in the coffin. And 11 years later, I kept waiting for him to come back, and that hadn't happened. So, you know, that's all storytelling to me in a way. It's all kind of like, you know, good movie stuff. But how it works in truth, I don't.
It's like the movies, right?
Well, it is in many ways, and for him not to have to come back, that I've never heard before. You know, the idea that we have to do anything to help him not come back. If you're going to come back, you're going to come back. And if you have a resistance to coming back, trust me, nothing will bring you back faster. You know, it's what's there to resist? It's just what is. You can't fight what is. I'll tell you one last story. It's a weird story. It happened last night. My son is traveling through West Africa with his girlfriend. And Blanche and I had no desire for him to go there at all. and hoped he wouldn't go because the whole Ebola virus thing was happening, and he was going to Sierra Leone, and he luckily or happily for us decided not to go there. He went to Senegal, and he's going to be there for a month, and I was just uncomfortable in general about him being in that space. 3 a.m. we get a phone call from this company that tracks people with satellite phones. It was their emergency group, saying that they got a signal from him that he had set off the emergency button, but it hadn't gone off long enough that they couldn't track him, and they couldn't find him. And where was he? And what can we give them to let them know? Because there's clearly something going on here, and they don't know what it is. Well, this is 3 a.m. And Blanche and I wake Blanche, and we're looking through all of his papers about where is he and where could he be and what's happening. And the drama of that is so enormous. And finally, I gave them the hotel he had just been in, the hotel he was going to. He had not arrived at the new hotel. It was like every fear that a parent can have about their child disappearing in Africa. And we had a map. You look at this place in Senegal. Where is this? And so we went through this whole thing with them, and they said, well, there's nothing more we can do at this point. If we get another signal, we can work something out, and they will keep me in the loop. And then it was over. And it's like 4 a.m, and Blanche just goes back to bed. And I'm like, my mind is going like, oh my God, am I going to have to fly to Africa? Has he been kidnapped? Am I going to have to ransom him out? Is there something? I had no idea because it's mind. I'm a writer. I'm a creator. So all this drama, it was horrible. Blanche just said, there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do. And so she went back to sleep. And I just thought, I married this amazing woman. This is like, I didn't know what to do. So I'm lying there going, well, this is the end of sleep, and I'm waiting for another phone call. That's I was really upset, but I just laid there, and finally I just said, well, she's right. There's nothing we can do, and so I went back to sleep, and the phone rang, and actually before the phone rang, I got a text. It's from Ari saying, it went off by mistake. The emergency thing was in my pack, and it went off by mistake, and we're fine. We're just fine. And then these people called back to say, we've located him, and he's fine. Everything was fine. But the lesson for me in all of this was, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do. It's so vital. It's the mind that gets us in trouble. It's the mind that builds up scenarios. The truth of it was, go back to sleep. And we did, and I slept beautifully, and so did Blanche. But I slept beautifully because, as a teacher, she showed me how to do it. We teach each other, we inform each other, we are part of each other. The truth is, there's nothing we can do, and when you surrender, what is supposed to reveal itself does. And now, here we are. So this is the ongoing lesson of life. Drama, half of it the mind, most of it, nothing you can do anything about. Live it. Be it. Move on. The end.
I actually think it died a long time ago.
What?
I think the battery gave out a while ago.
Oh, really? Well, that's interesting. Huh. Thank you. How long ago? Like before the questions?
Just about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank God for all those poor people who would have to sit through all that.
Question.
Uh-huh.
You spoke that Rudi's teachings was focused on change and transformation, and that yours is just the here and now, not just but is. So is there? But then you said it's all intertwined and it's all interwoven.
Mm-hmm.
So if Rudi were alive now, and he heard you say, well, to him your teaching is about transformation and mine is about here and now. Can you just explain? Because I always thought that your teaching was totally in sync with every aspect of Rudi's self-realized being. Am I expressing that?
Well, I just found in 40 years of sitting that I did not arrive at my idea of what awakening was, of wherever we're supposed to go. It just didn't happen. And I did everything Rudi said. I did all the work, the breathing. I sat twice every day of my life. I just, I worked, I asked, I lived it. I lived in ashrams. I gave up career to be part of that. I've taught everything, and it didn't happen. And I didn't know what that thing was that was supposed to happen. And I always felt somewhat of a failure in all of that. And then this thing took place, which took the seeker out of the equation, and there it was. And the thing that was there was what was there all the time. Rudi had never led me to that understanding. He was not a non-dualist in that regard. He was not talking about this is that. Not in those terms. But part of that, I think, was we were so young and so needy of a certain kind of instruction. The kind of get your life together instruction that really is important. People were in their teens, late teens, early 20s when he was teaching. Many of us, and I was a little bit older. And so I think his instruction led in that way. I don't think I've in any way eliminated or abandoned Rudi's teaching. I think I've just taken it to a place that I don't think he articulated. Now, that may be true and it may not. I mean, would he have gone there if he was still here? Or would he have gone in a different direction? There's no way to tell, but he's not here exactly. And I don't feel he's absent within me. So I think this is where it goes. I don't know where else it would go, personally. I don't know what else it could lead to other than, I mean, even Buddha, his enlightenment basically was ultimately to the middle path. He wasn't going to attain powers and supernatural powers. His power was to be present, to be. Everything I'm saying is very much in alignment with those teachings. I think it's not out of alignment with most Christian teachings, especially as they come directly from Christ. It's certainly part of the non-interpreted teachings of other teachers. It seems very real, but I may be wrong, which is fine. And it may be that what I'm saying to you is kind of alien and discomforting. And if that's the case, if it's too much, I would say then you don't want to sit here. Then don't sit with this, because it won't work for you. And in this particular transmission. But sit with it for a while, perhaps, and see if this starts to percolate into the system. But you've been doing Rudi's work for a long time, and that's like sit and ask for help to surrender and ask. I tell people, you haven't been back to the introductory class, but I tell people, don't do the breathing exercise. And I tell them, only use it if you really need it. But most people in their meditation they're there. If you ask for help to surrender in the middle of being already there, you're just interrupting the flow of that. You're just getting in the way of your own already being present. Why do that? Save it for when you need it. If you're having a really bad week or something really is going on, the tool of that double breath is phenomenally valuable. But when you're sitting and you're just there and you're present, there's nothing to do at all. There's just nothing to do. So if it's become a rote practice of please help me to surrender, you're actually doing the opposite. You're actually getting in the way of being present. And I find a lot of people on a spiritual path are really, in a subversive way, getting away from spirituality. They're actually avoiding it. A lot of people who want to have a spiritual life are really creating an identity that is a new place to rest their ego, so that they can have now a spiritual badge along with their human badge or whatever career badge that they have. Real spiritual awakening is the getting rid of all that stuff. It doesn't go anywhere. It'll still be there. It'll be in the logs of, there you are. You're still got a spiritual thing. People look at me as a spiritual teacher and as a screenwriter and as a father and a husband and all these things. All these tags are very much there, but they are not defining of the whole being. So you have to be willing to move on, let it go, but use it for what can be used for. And his teaching has real value. Has real value. Okay?
Thank you.
What did Rudi say about your LSD experience? I know he didn't, well, I read, he didn't tolerate drugs in his students.
You're right. No, he didn't. Well, tolerate's the wrong word, but he said if you do drugs, don't come here.
Right.
I think basically his feeling was he will give me LSD experience and more in his teaching, that I don't need drugs, that the teaching will do it. And the closest I ever came to that was a dream I had where I was with Rudi for maybe 6 months, 9 months, and I was sitting in a cab of a truck with him, and I said, Rudi, if I don't get an experience soon, I'm going to take LSD. Because I said, that at least had a real experience. And he looked at me and said, here, and he went like that, and I blasted out of the truck. I went on a journey through the universe that was as big as the LSD trip, and I came back. He said, there.
Wow.
So that's all I can tell you. The LSD trip was absolutely essential. There's always an ignition point for everybody in their spiritual pursuit. And that was the beginning of an awakening that took 40 years.
Yeah, Zigzag Zen talks about the different drugs and what people did, and it opened up their spirituality, and they dropped the drugs and moved
Well,
on.
some people.
Some people.
And other people stayed it with the drug. I mean, everybody's different. We all have, whatever the route is that we need to go. The universe has a lot of ways of nudging us into a spiritual path. That's why I say everybody's individual ride is valid. Whatever, you can probably go back and tell me the moment that you started to feel this, that you wanted this. Mostly it's from some vision or dissatisfaction or depression or something where you say, the world's not enough. So you look for more, and then what they finally teach you is the world was enough, you just didn't see it. And there you
One
are.
last one.
Mhm.
Sorry. One, I'm not sure if it was John Mann or Stuart Perrin, but one of them had one line in their book about Rudi and Atlantis. Did he ever speak to you about Atlantis?
No.
Okay.
I think Atlantis may have come up along the way, but
Just curious.
I don't know what to say about it. Look, everybody, all the Atlanteans in the world like to think that there was once a perfect, there was a perfect place, a Camelot, that existed. This is it. This is Atlantis.
Yeah.
And the idea that you're going to get to Atlantis, or that it existed and got lost, Paradise Lost, or being kicked out of the Garden of Eden, you can look to all the myths you want. The thing you awaken to is that you're in it. And have always been in it.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, guys.